Thank you so much for joining us.
No, I hope it's the audio and visuals and so forth, everybody is good.
Yeah. So okay. We were just waiting for all the panelists to join in so that we can all see each other on this stage. And now we can proceed. This looks like a beautiful panel, just, saying that I'm not biased in any way. So what I will do now is I will introduce everybody because there's some new people who don't know. If you could mute yourself, that would be helpful because we don't hear ourselves back. And then what I'll do is I'll introduce everybody, and then I'll have the High Commissioner give her keynote remarks. And then we'll start a panel discussion with our 3 panelists. So this should be very exciting. Just as an introduction to why we are here today on this virtual stage, earlier this year when the COVID pandemic hit, a few of us working in different communities around Pakistan were getting a lot of messages from concerned students and young graduates and young professionals who did not know what the next career step should be. Especially, a lot of students were graduating in June and we were getting a lot of emails and messages. So our community, which is Women in Energy Pakistan, got together with 2 of our fellow communities. One is Women Engineers Pakistan and the other is Women in Tech Pakistan. And the 3 of us said, okay, you know what, let's be ambitious. Let's do something about this. So this is the largest digital job fair in Pakistan. We have more than 1,400 candidates and more than 60 companies at this digital job fair. It's 2 days of back-to-back 9 panel sessions and keynotes. So it's a lot of excitement. And hopefully we'll survive the weekend in high spirits as well. So in this panel, titled Pakistan's Clean Energy Transition, Preparing the Workforce Towards Going Green. What we aim to discuss here is how do we create a net zero workforce in Pakistan? How do we ensure that students and graduates are reskilled for a green job? We also want to discuss what is currently making a difference towards a low carbon future and what are some of the biggest challenges. And I'll ask specific questions to our panelists regarding the work that they've been doing in this sector. So, Your Excellency, I'll sort of point towards you. When we last hosted you in September 2019 last year, we discussed the importance of including women in the energy transition. I remember that you mentioned how Canada has a feminist foreign policy, and that stuck with a lot of us since. So today we're hosting expert female voices in the climate and clean energy sector in Pakistan to share more on what an energy transition for Pakistan can look like. So I'll want to dig deeper into what job opportunities exist now and what critical skills can our youth seek to develop to be a leading force for this. So with that, I will hand over the stage to you for your keynote.
Great. Thank you so very much for the opportunity to be here today. And I'm looking only at the wonderful panelists and really looking forward to hearing from you, but also very conscious that we have, I gather, many, many people online as well. And it's I think if we've learned anything from the last sort of 9 months of the COVID-inspired world, is that we have found new ways to connect with one another, to listen to one another, to learn from one another, and that the STEM world, the science and technology world, is something that can really bring a benefit. Every crisis brings opportunity, and so the opportunity we've had in this particular world is to figure out how we can engage with one another a little bit more easily than physically traveling around, which is also the importance of clean and green in Pakistan is the phrase that's often used, but a climate-friendly world. I was so excited to be part of this because I think that there is a great future for all young people, frankly, but particularly women and girls as they look forward to careers in STEM, in these non-traditional areas that women have not been well represented in for many years, traditionally at all. And the confluence of climate and environment awareness and the importance of addressing environmental issues and the importance of transforming our economy which at the same time, the new areas in which, so what does a green economy look like? What do green opportunities look like? And the opportunity to get women involved in these areas, I think, is really exciting. So this is the place to be right now for all of the employers that are online. Look to the talent that's available in the female population, young population, and for all of the women out there that are looking for opportunities in this particular field. I think you are absolutely online. As a history and political science graduate myself, I think if I had to go back 40 years or so to my own schooling, I'd be looking at how do I get involved in a green economy? How do I contribute to a green economy? So this is tremendously important. I think that I always have to do sort of my thinking about the Canada-Pakistan nexus to all of this. And I'm really excited that today, and in fact, one of our panelists is an active participant in this area, but Canada and Pakistan are really working together well, I think, on a green transformation, on a green climate and green economy. We are co-chairing at the moment the Green Climate Fund Board of Governors that is looking at how to use some of the international financing available to help developing countries transform their economies into a green economy. Nauman Bashir Bhatti is the co-chair of this particular board with a Canadian, Sue Sosbo, who is one of my colleagues from our Global Affairs department back in Ottawa, our Foreign Ministry. And together they have really been leading the charge for the last year in looking how to use international financing to support the green economy. There's just been a board meeting, and I was reminded of this, and maybe one of our panelists will speak, but an updated strategic plan which approved over US, when we ever say dollars as a Canadian, I have to say US dollars, but $2 billion in new climate finance to promote reductions in emissions, a climate resilient future. And that's really where I think the opportunities in this new economy come into play. Where do people, women, girls, young men, people currently in the STEM environment, where can they focus their attention to ensure that we have a greener future? A country like Pakistan, and I think many people will have said this, many people more will be saying this, is that it is a country that is one of the ones in the world that is most impacted by climate change. And it's impacted by the emissions that have been created by developing countries over the years. It also is impacted by emissions and unfriendly climate policies that are practiced currently within Pakistan itself. Adaptation and resilience, I've said, they are the key to moving the economy forward. And that is across all sectors. STEM in particular has the role to play, but every sector of the economy, whether it is entrepreneurial, trading, commerce, agriculture, forestry, water, manufacturing, all have to be transformed with a view to how do we control emissions, how do we reduce the amount of waste, how do we adapt business practices to be greener. In Pakistan, the energy sector, and we're, women in energy are the critical piece here. The energy sector is Pakistan's largest source of global greenhouse gas emissions. 43% of the emissions from Pakistan, which is a fraction of the global total still, but for Pakistan, 43% come from the energy sector. And the growth in the demand for energy is coincidence with the growth in emissions. There have been new coal plants coming online in Pakistan. But at the same time, I think the government of Pakistan, and we've been watching and talking to people about this, we in the diplomatic community in Canada, is cognizant of the fact that renewable energy sources, clean energy, is the way to grow Pakistan's economy. There's a new policy in place that's moved the capacity of the energy sector, sort of the cap on production from 5% will soon move to 30%. And that means huge investments in wind, in what Canadians call hydro, which here in Pakistan is often referred to as hydel. Ideally in local generation, micro hydro projects, in the investment in new transmission capacity and more efficient transmission capacity to reduce waste, to more efficient distribution networks. So moving energy from source, from generation across large areas, and which in Pakistan, like Canada, you have to move the development of, the production of energy long distances in order to get it to the people who need it, and often in remote and rural communities, and then distribute it in a way that incents efficient usage, which means efficient payment methods. So really the opportunities for STEM and in energy is across the board, from planning and design and project management and engineering, very hard technical skills, very what we call the soft skills, the communications, so that people in Pakistan understand the value in conservation, efficient usage, and others. So I really see, it's when we are looking for new economic opportunities, the development of new jobs, it's really every sphere that has a climate lens attached to it and a green lens attached to it, and that's an opportunity. And where there are opportunities, there are jobs, and that's where I would really encourage young people, and particularly women, to focus their attention. One of the critical elements, and I think I spoke to this when I met with STEM, about a year ago now, is really sort of an understanding of what diversity brings to companies and what diversity brings to the job environment. And every company that's out there should want to have in their workforce, at their decision-making tables at every level, both women and men, representatives from minorities, representatives from different ethnic communities, from different geographic communities. This makes business better. There is no question that if you have a representation of a diversity of opinion when policies are being developed, when business strategies are being developed, when business decisions are being made, that they will be better decisions, better strategies, better policies. And that's something that I really think that in Pakistan, like in Canada and around the world, but particularly here where there's been an absence of diversity at the table, that's one of the key drivers for growth and for development. And so again, I speak to the employers that are out there. When you are looking at the people you're hiring, if you are presented with a diversity of candidates who are equally qualified, and in many cases, they will be better, the diverse candidates will be better qualified, better capable, because they've had to work so much harder to get to the point where they're submitting their CV to you, that you should really think about taking a good look at those CVs and bringing them to the table. We try to do this in the Canadian government. We have specific policies with respect to diversity and inclusion. We don't always get them right. It's taken us a long time to get here, but we're very conscious of it now. Even as an employer here in Pakistan, as I'm looking at opportunities, very small numbers in my High Commission, I'm really pushing my human resources section to think about how do we incent diverse candidates to get their applications in so that we have an opportunity to look across the wealth of talent that exists and get these people to the table. And it's not about taking less qualified candidates. It's about recognizing that qualifications can come from different areas, that the path to success can often be varied depending on where a candidate comes from, and it's about giving them the opportunity to succeed. I spoke when I was with you the last time about a particular initiative that Canada has launched with a number of other countries to get women into non-traditional areas, STEM in particular, and that's the Equal by 30 campaign. And I would encourage people to, especially the employers, but also young women out there, to look at the website Equal by 30 and learn about some of the practices that Canada, Sweden, other countries are trying to inculcate into our employment practices and our hiring practices to ensure that we have opportunity for diversity at the table. So I see that the panel has come back on my screen, which probably is my invitation to stop talking. So I will do that now, but I'm really excited by the opportunity that this event has brought to the landscape, the opportunities for young women in Pakistan, and really looking forward to hearing the panel. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That was probably the smoothest transition from keynote to a panel discussion that we've had. It's always such a pleasure to listen to your keynote, and this is my third time, and it's always so much inspiring messages from your keynote. So while you're here, I would like to introduce our amazing panelists. So I'll start with Sobiah Becker. Sobiah Becker is a climate change specialist Her expertise lies in the areas of climate, energy, sustainable development, in creating partnerships and platforms for action, in driving favorable outcomes through policy and programmatic interventions. She's led initiatives in climate risk management, bringing climate risk microinsurance to market in several countries. She serves public policymakers and private sector stakeholders in defining and implementing adaptation and mitigation strategies for growth in carbon-constrained economies, as well as facilitating public and private stakeholders to implement these strategies that drive favorable outcomes. Currently, she serves as climate change advisor to the Foreign and Commonwealth Development Organization. Moving on to the next panelist, we have Kashmala Kakakhel. She's a climate finance specialist and also a member of the Prime Minister's Strategic Reform Unit. Kashmala has 14 years of experience of working with governments and development partners in Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Malawi, Kenya, Mexico, Myanmar, Nepal, and Pakistan. I didn't want to leave out all the countries, so I kept them in the bio. Her core competence lies in international policy on climate finance, ensuring it is in line with the needs and requirements of the developing countries, and works with developing countries to design projects for which funding can be secured from international funds for climate change. Our third panelist is Maryam Khalid. She's a friend of mine, so I will resort to the first name basis immediately so that we don't feel awkward later. Marium currently works at the Punjab Energy Efficiency and Conservation Agency, which is a part of the government of Punjab. She's the head of legal. PICA, the agency, works on bridging the gap between the demand and supply of energy through efficiency and conservation measures. Mariam has an LLB from the University of London and University of Melbourne in Australia. She's given several talks on the importance of energy efficiency, and that's what we have her here on this panel for as well. I should mention she is a co-chair for Women in Energy Network and has been instrumental in organizing this job fair as well. So with this amazing introduction to all of our amazing panelists, I think I will start with my first question to Sobiah. Sobiah, I'll keep my questions short because I'm sure the audience and myself included, we want to hear from you more. So as part of your work to support the Ministry of Climate Change in Pakistan, and you're working with public stakeholders in developing a cohesive framework for national climate action, can you please describe for us where does Pakistan stand on starting this clean energy transition? Because clearly we're not on it yet. And what do the different stakeholders in public and private sector need to do to prepare the workforce, especially our young workforce, towards going green?
Thank you very much, Namira, and I'd like to congratulate the Women in Energy for organizing this wonderful event today. My special thanks to High Commissioner Gilmour, and I almost have a case of whiplash because as you were talking, I was shaking my head non-stop. And thank you so much for making my job easier by setting the stage so nicely. Namira, thank you for your question. It's a very important topic, and I'm gonna what Ambassador Gilmour started. I'm just gonna continue with that a little bit in terms of setting the stage. So we know that Pakistan is one of the top 10 countries that's most affected by climate change. And we see these negative impacts in the floods of Karachi, in the destruction of our crops by locusts. We see it in the rate at which Pakistan is desertifying and the rate at which entire species are being lost. So we are seeing climate change impacts reflected across the entire spectrum of our existence. And above all, the corona pandemic is now telling us that we need to fundamentally shift how we live, eat, and grow if we are to survive as a species. So 2020 has been a critical year all around as we struggle to contain this climate emergency. But 2020 also is a year of hope because it marks the start of the decade of action to 2030, which is when we as a global community will show tangible progress towards commitments to limit global warming, hopefully achieving these commitments by 2050 when we become carbon neutral or net zero. And this carbon neutrality is essential to limiting global warming to within 1.5 degrees centigrade as set out in the Paris Agreement. There is an urgent need to minimize our carbon footprint. So we need to decarbonize our systems, all systems. And the biggest system that should be decarbonized as a priority is our energy system. The rate of decarbonization depends upon what prominence is given to new renewable energy sources, the clean energy that you have been talking about, as well as energy efficiency. So as High Commissioner Gilmour was saying, our projections show that if the demand for energy keeps growing at the pace it has been, then by 2030, greenhouse gas emissions from the energy sector alone are going to grow to 898 million tons of carbon dioxide by 2030, and this will increase to 2,685 metric tons of carbon dioxide by 2050. And this obviously will have disastrous implications for the societies as well as for the systems that we live in. So the message is we have to decarbonize and we have to decarbonize fast. You asked what the transition to clean green energy is going to look like. So clean energy is energy that uses renewable, replenishable sources to generate energy that does not emit more greenhouse gases or pollutants that harm the planet. And in line with its international climate goals, Pakistan is committed to increasing the share of renewable energy sources by 30% till 2030. So often when we think of clean energy, our thoughts go to solar, it goes to hydro or hydel. And here I would also like to stress that the efficiency of energy usage is just as important from a climate change perspective. So I'm very happy to see Marium also be a part of this panel. What do public and private stakeholders need to do? Obviously, we need to work together. Government needs to formulate cohesive and sensible policies that are going to see the shift to net zero by 2050, which is often known as, are referred to as mid-century growth strategies. And what the future job market is going to look like, it's also going to be linked to these mid-century strategies. So we've seen the world over, even during COVID-19, as other sectors were shrinking, renewables were steadily growing. In fact, the International Renewable Energy Agency, IRENA, estimates that the renewable energy sector expanded by as much as 8% in some countries. So this is a very welcome development because it indicates a higher level of consciousness among people in their demand for clean, green sources of fuel to power up their lives. When you do have this shift towards a cleaner, greener energy system, obviously you're also going to need a workforce that supports the system. And so a net zero workforce to support Pakistan in transitioning away from coal as well as fossil fuels will be a highly talented and skilled set of women as well as men who recognize that our lifestyles today cannot come at the cost of future generations. So we need people who are committed to long-term sustainable approaches to powering societies. So some of the skill sets that I think we should be looking for are engineers, obviously, but we also need physicists and we need chemists. We need major investments, both by the public as well as the private sector, in technical and vocational education. Because as I think the moderator of the last session was saying, that degrees matter, skills matter more, and a work ethic matters also. So we need investments in technical as well as vocational education to produce skilled craftspeople. We need energy economists because, as Ms. Gilmour was saying, you need to move energy. You need an enabling policy as well as a regulatory framework. You need energy economists who are going to work on smart subsidies and even smarter pricing strategies. We need very robust research and development, and this is where significant investments from the public, primarily public sector, I would say, that needs to come in. So we need that robust R&D to explore new materials, better processes, and improved approaches, because business as usual will not be enough. But most of all, we need social entrepreneurs who are going to develop the solutions that we need, as well as the job opportunities to reach the bottom of the pyramid. And very importantly, we need to crowd women in who are often the poorest of the poor when it comes to energy access. So let's start a revolution. Let's train women. Let's have them as solar energy technicians, as battery operators, and let's create more opportunities for everyone in our societies. And this, I believe, is fundamental to reaching or getting to a net zero workforce in Pakistan. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. That was an excellent overview of the entire topic that we wish to cover. I'll quickly move on to Kashmala. Kashmala, I'll keep the question very brief, but the answer will be very, very it will be very holistic, I'm sure. What are some of the policies and some of the plans that the Pakistani government is currently working on to prepare our workforce for this green energy transition? And also to have gender parity in the energy sector and in labor force. So I feel like I'm putting you on a spot with, what is the government doing? But do share, your insight on what you've seen from the public and also the private sector.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me, Namira. And it's great having such amazing women on the panel. It's great to be able to share and add my voice to the conversation that we're having over here. So in terms of what the government is doing, I think I'd like to take a sort of a step back and try and understand what sort of the gaps are and how we can actually zoom in on it when it actually comes to the workforce itself. If we look, let's just try and look at climate change and the money, and then let's come down to how we can put these two things together and actually use it to transform into a net zero workforce. What I have seen consistently, I've been working in the climate change sphere for over 13 years now, and what I've seen consistently, the space that developing countries generally miss out on when we talk about climate change internationally, and then of course when we absorb that and talk about it domestically, we just are fixated with talking about floods, disasters, adaptation, resilience, which is absolutely important. And that's the area we should be focusing on because it's a real challenge and we need to be able to respond to it. But then there's this whole world out there within the climate change sphere, which talks about mitigation, primarily reducing the impacts of climate change, which is reducing emissions and hence moving towards transitioning towards a completely different economy. And we somehow miss that entire sector, the entire space or the entire conversation that's happening globally on the mitigation part of things. And Pakistan has consistently been missing that piece. We're trying to fix things domestically without realizing there is help out there, there is technology out there, and most importantly, there are finances out there that can actually help us leapfrog and change and transform the way we do business and the way we generate and the way we look at energy efficiency and all those elements, whether it's our agriculture, whether it's our transport sector, whether it's energy generation in general. We actually have access to facilities that are available internationally that we do need to tap into. Of course, there's competitive funds, and the High Commissioner spoke about the Green Climate Fund, and we've had the privilege of co-chairing together with Canada. It's been amazing with Sue and her team. And there's so much that we've been able to understand around the fact that, yes, there is money out there, but at the same time, what are the challenges? And primarily, one is the mindset, which I just explained, which is really about the climate change money out there is not just really about dikes and floods and early warning systems, which is great and which is exactly what countries need. But at the same time, it's also there to help you transform your economy to a low carbon economy. And for that, the primary challenge that we're constantly facing as a country, and we're constantly that I'm trying to have a conversation around, is really the access of it. How do you actually access these funds that are available? And then how do you engage women? How do you engage the entrepreneurs? How do you engage the young people out there? We know there's a massive movement in Pakistan where people like to set up their own. We have young entrepreneurs, they're going out there, they have great ideas. There's lots that they want to do. We have these amazing incubation centers that I normally visit and have excellent chats with these young people. They have great ideas, but then ideas also need resources. So there is a world out there. There's this although limited, hence it's competitive, and then you have to be in a global sphere to be able to compete for it. But at the same time, the ideas are good enough to put on an international level to be able to access those funding opportunities that we have available. So from that perspective, the space that we need to, and an area that I've constantly been engaging with the youth on is, let's try and look at what the access challenges are, and let's try and bit by bit address those, so that we are able as a generation to move forward and help the country leapfrog into a situation where we are not leaving anyone behind. We're transitioning in a way that, with the new skill set which you acquire through time, is able to move everybody together. And needless to say, women, the fact that you look at some of these studies that even, say, for example, the UK is doing, they've committed to go to a net zero by 2050. So very clear on that account. They have a timeline there, and they've also identified the areas that they need to move into, whether it's the e-vehicles, how they have to improve their homes, and how they're supposed to use heating solutions in their homes, etc. So all of that is clear. And within that, they've also identified that 400,000 jobs is what they need to actually move from where they are right now to be able to move to their net zero target. Even in Pakistan, we have a target, Sobiah mentioned, and then the High Commissioner also referred to the policy that we have now in hand. By 2030, we need to go 30% renewable. So the target is clear. How do you break that down in terms of what is it that you need to do specifically, and then you break that down into what sort of skill set you actually need to be able to actually achieve that target. So target alone, the government has set. It has also given it has also tried to give an enabling environment where they're allowing technology transfer. They're reducing. So, for example, there's no tariffs on import of equipment, etc. So they are creating that environment for people now. But it's up to now the private sector to actually tap in and use or change the way some of the skill sets that they already have to be able to work in an industry that is now opening up in a big way in Pakistan.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Using everything that Sobiah and also Kashmala have said, Mariam, I'm going to pose the next question to you. Yours is slightly different, so we'll add more sort of angle and nuance to the conversation. From your experience of working in Punjab, and especially for an organization dedicated to be working on energy efficiency and conservation, would you say that this is still a very nascent sector in Pakistan? And most importantly, what kind of jobs will be created when energy efficiency picks up more in Pakistan? And what are some of the entry points for women in particular in the energy sector, energy efficiency sector? Mariam, you are on mute.
Thank you very much, Meera, for having me on this panel. As you absolutely said, energy efficiency is still a very nascent area. And as a female working in this sector, also from a non-STEM background, I will let you know what my first reaction was when I was joining this industry. I honestly thought, what is so fancy about tweaking your lights and bulbs? Really, what could this possibly mean for a lawyer? And then I realized, as we look at energy transition, we're not just looking at engineers, we're looking at a whole workforce, which is full of policymakers and financial specialists and lawyers. So when I entered this, I realized we can add as much supply as we want to our energy mix, but if we don't change the way we use energy and the way we consume energy, we will not be able to meet the targets that we have promised under the Paris Agreement. Now, I want to highlight a little bit of what we exactly mean when we're talking about energy efficiency and the kind of jobs this would entail. We are making a lot of changes when it comes to standards for appliances. We're making a lot of changes to building codes because we've discovered that 40% of your energy consumption is because of high intensive buildings. Then we have been making changes for electric vehicles and for transport because they're also, again, a very high consumer of energy and electricity. So the kind of jobs that we look at this sector in the future are there for not just engineers, but for lawyers and policymakers as well. And especially for energy auditors and managers, because the first step to an energy efficiency improvement starts with conducting an audit. and to basically discover how and where is your energy being leaked. But one other thing that I wanted to speak to, and I know this is something we've spoken about before as well, it's almost impossible to speak of an energy transition and not talk about climate smart mining. And I've always been telling you that we must put this in this panel because I've had a background in mining extractors, and these are two sectors which have always been seen as competitors. But now that we move towards more solar panels, more wind turbines, more electric lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles, we can't do it if we don't mine. But it's just that Pakistan, as you said, we're so slow on energy efficiency, we're not even there yet on mining. Mining's always been associated with unsustainable practices, and there's so many other issues with it. But there's one thing that I'll say, which really resonates with me. If it hasn't been grown, it's mined. That's how it goes. You've been mining forever. It's just that you haven't been mining sustainably. So these are two areas that I believe in parallel will be creating significant opportunities for young folks in the next 10 years.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mariam. So my next set of questions, I'm going to keep them even more specific in terms of, for the purposes of this job fair. Again, I want to reiterate the reason we're having this job fair is because in-person job fairs are not taking place anymore. So in Pakistan, a lot of universities hold job fairs, and clearly someone needed to fill that gap. So we're here as a stopgap measure. 1,400 plus candidates registered for this, and a lot of live participants watching this panel right now. And for them, what can this panel say to this audience? So Sobiah, I'll come back to you and ask you, what will this sector look like in the next 10 to 15 years? Because that's so important when students are choosing their majors and concentrations and their training courses right now. Because it's so important not for you to be skilled for what's available in the job market right this minute, but to also think about what your career might look like in the next 10 to 15 years. So, keeping this in mind, what are the opportunities and green jobs going to look like?
Thank you very much, Namira. I touched upon this question in a manner of speaking in my introduction already, but I think that as we see the share of renewables growing in the energy mix, as we see greater applications of solar technologies, clearly we're going to need a very strong engineering base. And there are often times that I say to anybody who cares to listen, because I feel quite strongly about this, is that if it were up to me, I would have schools that really concentrate on the natural sciences, on mathematics and economics and the other subjects that you need to get, because we need to build this workforce that has all of these technical skills that they need in order to deliver what has been promised by 2030 and later. We're going to need engineers. We are going to need, in addition to engineers, we're going to need technicians, and we're going to need skilled tradespeople who can handle these technologies. So on the one side, to complement what the engineers are doing, you're going to need people on the ground who are actually able to manage the functioning of these technologies on a day-to-day basis. So I made reference already to, for example, solar technicians, battery operators, and these are also vocations that are ideal for women. Even women who come from, who don't have a lot by way of formal education, nevertheless, they can be trained. And this has been shown around the world, where you have organizations like Solar Mama in Africa, and you also have many such examples that are closer to home. I referred also a little bit to how women are usually the poorest of the poor when it comes to energy access issues. And this will also address some of those issues. It will allow these women, underprivileged women, to be able to elevate their ranks. Because what we're looking at when we look at Pakistan's population is that and I also refer to the bottom of the pyramid in my opening remarks, is that you don't have a barrel-shaped population like you do, for example, in South Asia or so. You have more of a triangular population. So while we do have fortunate people who go on to universities, but we also have a very large population who is, if they're lucky, able to go to high school, or they might drop out before that. So it's important to develop that technical base, keeping in view the skills and the literacy levels that are already present. We've spoken about economists, so we also need energy economists. And I'm saying specifically energy economists because we're talking about transitioning to green energy right now. As Marium said, speaking about energy efficiency, and this is a topic that's very close to my heart because when I started my career in energy back in 2007, these were exactly the type of conversations we were having. So you're going to need architects who are familiar with energy efficiency, building designs, who are willing to invest in that. We need research and developers who are willing to explore alternate building materials as well as new approaches. And we're going to need a strong quality assurance aspect as well. So you need people trained in that. And also, as Mariam rightly pointed out, you can only manage what you can measure. So you need these energy managers, you need the energy service providers, etc. These are some of the skill sets that we need. And this is not to say that these are emerging areas or professions. They are already there, but I think more emphasis needs to be put on them. Just as importantly, and also linking back to what Kashmala was saying, the National Grid Report has, in the UK, has said that yes, we need 400,000 people at least for UK's net zero workforce. Unfortunately, we don't have these type of projections for Pakistan as yet. Pakistan also at this point in time does not have a mid-century net zero strategy. So this is something that we do need to work towards. But very importantly, for women who are either in the workforce right now and who are or who will be joining the workforce, we need to create enabling environments for them. Because I think the biggest tragedy is that a person goes to university, works very, very hard, and then either gets married and is unable to work, or leaves for parenting reasons and is unable to rejoin the workforce because either the employer didn't offer the enabling environment which allows her to nurture a family and be able to work. So we spoke a little bit about the importance of diversity and inclusion, but we also need to talk about the sustainability of employment as far as women are concerned, because that is still a gap. I think I'll stop here. I'll come back. Thank you.
Thank you so much. No, I love that you spoke about enabling environment, because no matter how much we work on getting more women in this sector, we work on recruitment policies, we work on quotas, government has them, private sector has them. If you don't retain and develop your talent, every next level of the career path, you see more women dropping down and you see a pyramid-shaped workforce. So the next level, you will see fewer and fewer women as leaders in the sector. And that's what Women in Energy as a network seeks to work on, not just to get more women in the energy sector, but to actually have women leaders in the wider energy sector. So as part of in creating this enabling environment, one of the newest projects or tasks that we've taken on as a network is actually working with a private sector solar company based out of Lahore on creating an industry standard HR policy for them. So it's a sort of a new company, came out 5 to 6 years ago, and there are lots of solar companies in Pakistan now, local ones. And because they're small and new and they're ambitious and they're growing, young CEOs, driven employees, this is the perfect sort of set of male champions to work with to have these enabling environments. So I'm so pleased to share that we've created the first sort of gender inclusive HR policy with this company that we now actually want to have as a blueprint for all the other companies in Pakistan to employ within their companies. And the second sort of activity that we're working on that I'm going to ask Marium to also elaborate on is training female engineers already in the sector on solar PV installation, as an example. So we're working with our partners, so not just by ourselves, but with private sector and friends in the community on giving these solar trainings to female engineers and technicians. So I'll stop here. I'll pose my first question to Kashmala, and Mariam, I've already sort of set the question for you, and I'll have, as soon as Kashmala ends, then Mariam, please feel free to take the stage. So Kashmala, my question to you is, what role can government policies play in achieving gender parity in the workforce? Because we're talking about the youth, but also gender at the same time. So just sort of, drilling back on the same question that I'm asking in different words, but just trying to get more from you about, what can government policies do for this? Thank you. You're on mute at the moment.
Sorry about that. So Namira, I think the first thing that the government ought to do in a best case scenario is actually look at the blueprint that you're talking about, that you've actually put together, and start from there. It's really about looking at where you start fixing things from the get-go, right? We try and avoid reaching a pyramid, but try and see how we encourage women constantly to be part of the system. And of course, it's a no-brainer, right? You try and encourage women to be part of the workforce in a way so that they're part of the transition. Yes, we have had women in the workforce and the numbers have been very limited, but now we see women coming out and actually playing their part in it. And now you must have seen the SECP, the Securities and Exchange Commission of Pakistan, has actually changed their, I'm giving you an example of where they've requested 30% of the board members now need to be women, right? So these are all small changes that they're bringing in, but they need to be, again, this is something that I keep telling people, that don't include me in a conversation because I'm a woman, include me because I have something important to say. So for me, it's not about a quota of 30% or 20%. This all goes, that's fine. You're sort of giving them a place to be at because they wouldn't have been if you didn't have that quota. But at the same time, for me to continue, it has to be because you have to listen to me, not just because I have to be there. So there definitely is a mind shift. It's less of a policy. Yes, of course, there's policies and all those things, but unless and until you have the mind shift where you say, yes, women are, 50% of your population is women. And so if you're able to hone them properly, you're able to give them the right access to the information so that they skill well, and then they actually come and contribute to the industry, and then they go up the ladder to be part of the decision-making processes. So absolutely, 100%, it has to be a mind shift change. And then of course there's a bit of like what they call a danda in Pakistan or in Urdu, where you say, yes, you do change policies, and you say it has to be a top-down approach where you say, no, you have to give women a seat at the table so they're able to be part of the decision-making processes. So it has to be a bit of both, where you try and constantly, especially with women like you coming out and creating these platforms where people can actually talk about these issues. And so you empower each other and build off each other. So, right, you sort of support each other, and then you give each other the comfort and the confidence to be able to be part of these conversations. And then, of course, you try and push one mindset at a time to be able to encourage and include women in these conversations at the right place. And I know you haven't asked me this question, it was posed to Sobiah, but I'd just like to add a little bit around what sort of workforce we should be entering into, or the skill set. I'll take a minute. I know there are lots of studies that we look at, and then people call them myths and all of that, where you say students entering primary school today, 50% or 60% or 80% of the jobs don't exist today when they will actually be entering the work market. And you hear that all the time. And technological advancements have been happening since time immemorial. It's not that we're in some special time frame right now. It's constantly changing. So to actually say, look, today at this point, this is the degree or this is the skill that you need to actually look into so that you have job security 5, 6, 7 years down the line will be difficult. But what we actually, when we talk about the energy transition in Pakistan, again, the other thing that I see is we constantly look at renewable energy, and within renewable energy, we just focus on solar energy. So if you look at the climate change policy, the renewable energy policy, it's called the RE, the Alternative and Renewable Energy Policy. So there's a bunch of other things that we also need to consider. That area is lacking currently. For example, waste to energy, nuclear, biomass, geothermal, then there's natural gas. So there's all these pieces. Wind I won't even touch because that we sort of put together with renewable energy. When we talk about renewable energy, we primarily talk about the sun, and then wind, Pakistan. We can talk about the merits and demerits of actually looking at wind energy in Pakistan separately. But again, we need to try and get more people to be involved or understand about alternative energy and the opportunities that may exist over there if you have more people focusing on that. Yes, of course, the efficiency needs to be looked into. Yes, of course, the resourcing, the financing needs to be looked into. But it was only until like 15 years ago when we started taking solar energy seriously. And because of the amount of effort that has gone into it, it has actually become a very cheap, it's become a competitor with, say, the fossil fuels at this point. It's only because we threw all the smart people at the problem. So if we try and do the same with other sources of energy, we might be in a much better place than we are right now. Thank you.
Taking over from that, I think, Namira, one of the most important things that we discovered in our own experience, if you have women in leadership positions, that will automatically open up space for other women. So because we were in senior positions, we made sure all our interns were going for energy audits. Because for engineers specifically, we discovered if you don't have on-field work experience, that's going to be a serious impediment to your growth. And we didn't want the female engineers to be relegated to administrative work, for instance. So we're very happy the kind of women that we've actually had in the organization have been very forthright about saying we want to go out on the field. And then the onus is on us to make sure that they're absolutely comfortable having a chat with their male colleagues and counterparts and making sure that we will be keeping an eye on them. And it's really up to them to make sure their female colleagues feel that that public space belongs as much to them as the men. One other thing that I know you mentioned and we worked on with our partners are the solar trainings. Because one of the other panelists has mentioned earlier on that solar industry has such a remarkable role for women to play, especially for residential solar. Because in rural areas, culture is such that men are very hesitant about other men coming into your household. So if you actually have female engineers penetrating these markets, that will be a win-win situation. So I believe this is something that we really looked into. And as an organization, I'm proud that we've managed to ensure that we've brought in gender parity.
Excellent. Thank you so much. This has been amazing. And, as all moderators say, but I genuinely also believe it that I wish this conversation could go on for at least an hour or two more. But we do intend to sort of conclude today's panel discussions at 3 p.m. Pakistan time. So what I'll do is we still have 1 or 2 minutes. So Your Excellency, if you have any final sort of concluding remarks or any comments from any remarks from what our panelists have shared, I can give the last sort of stage to.
I'm thrilled and both very honored to have the chance for a last few words after having listened to these 3 incredible women with such wonderful experience across the breadth of both practical and policy and the management experience to bring to this debate. And I think what I take away from it is really a sense of opportunity. And it's getting our young graduates and women and girls that are going into sort of deciding where they're going to study is to, number one, think about what the landscape's going to look like. And I very much resonate. I've heard many times the idea that the jobs that exist today are not the jobs that are going to exist in 10 years or further down the road. And so, do our graduates need a crystal ball to develop those skills? No, I don't think so. I think that focusing on the fundamentals, and that's really where we get, if I can speak to the educators that are out there, getting a focus on activity-based learning, creativity, innovation, encouraging our young people to be proactive and questioning and quite frankly, not accepting of all of the rote that they might be provided in their schooling, so that when they come into the workforce, what they are offering employers is that real sense of what's the potential for change? How do we do things differently? How do we think outside of the box? That's one of the wonderful things about bringing young people into the workforce. And absolutely, we need to have, that needs to include women, and it needs to include women who have the hard technical skills and frankly, the public space to accept them. And so Marium, I very much hear from you that it's up to all of us as employers to help women enter these fields and to help create a safe environment for them to work. We cannot cede any further ground to some attitudes out there which don't want to see women in these spaces. But it's also having the graduates who come in with the non-technical backgrounds who can influence human resources practices, communications practices, and incorporate all of these ideas into the workplace so that we're able to do the transition that Kashmala and Sobiah have talked about, which is to the green economy. So I'm just thrilled to have been able to participate today. Loved hearing from these wonderful panelists. Look forward to connecting with you here in Pakistan and having a chance to carry the dialogue further onward. And wish you the very best for the STEM Forward job fair for the course of the rest of the panel.
Thank you so much. And with these amazing words, I will take the opportunity to end today's panel discussions. For all the audience that is tuning into us, please, I have two quick notes for you. One is we have active networking happening at our expo, which is currently taking place. There are a lot of companies there, 60 plus exhibitors. Some of them are actively and currently hiring. So do go to the expo, but also network amongst each other and with these company representatives. You may not know, another candidate like yourself may have an insight that might help with your resume or with your interview skills. So take both opportunities of the expo as well as the networking. And with that, thank you so much and see you all tomorrow morning. Before I exit also, we have a special dedicated session starting at 3:30 by Contour. So those of you who are interested, do watch and come back at 3:30. But otherwise, see you all tomorrow morning. And thank you so much for today.